Okay, so I'm sure you thought the conversation was going to begin this hardcore conversation. What in the world's an ABA white book? Like break it down.
Oh, the white book has always been joked as the kind of like the white Bible of behavior analysis, right? So applied behavior analysis is this kind of science of human behavior, right? It's this really nice circumstances view of problem behavior or any behavior. So basically, everything that we do, we learn. So it's a really wonderful way to look at the world because there's really no people that are broken, or it's just people that have different skill sets, and sometimes they get them in trouble, right? But this because they worked in the past. So I apply that in the field of education. But um, maybe I think the first one was in the '90s, late '90s was the first edition that came out. But basically, there is the White Book, which is kind of the textbook in behavior analysis. I mean, there's lots of great textbooks out there, but everybody refers to that. They use it to study. And so I actually have a copy back here this is the newest edition. I think this the third edition. I've had all the versions, but this is, it's just a great reference. It's like a compendium of all the different procedures and things that you need to know in behavior analysis. So I teach a lot of classes in behavior analysis. I do a lot of interventions. So I always kind of have this close by.
Where can I just get that off Amazon?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, I mean, this is not a plug. It's kind of funny. I wrote.
Oh no! I've seen this, but show it. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah, I have like a little
Duncan posted about
a dummies version, like this little dummies version.
No, then why don't I buy that? I'm gonna get that. Why didn't I buy that one? That's the one that I need.
Well, this is just this is for a lay person. This is like just kind of the basic principles, kind of laid out for folks.
I'm a lay person.
This is like Sunny D, right? And this is like your fresh squeezed orange juice with every possible thing in it. This is yeah.
So, I need your book. I mean, I've been doing this stuff for 14 years.
You just send me an email. I'll send you everything that you need. Anything you want, we'll get it covered. You don't have to order anything. We'll figure stuff out.
Well, then it goes this way for the movies or any of the books that I've written. You want anything, you just like I'll send you and you just look it over and you might look at it and say, you know what, Evan, I want none of this. And that is gonna be okay. But dude, well, because like I've been doing this for like 14 years. And I remember like when I started, and you have probably heard this a lot, because okay, so I'm a behavior interventionist. That's what they call us. And like I started off doing it, and I found myself very frustrated because you're told to do things a certain way, because the idea is, if everyone's doing it the same way, the client, child, whoever, man, woman, are going to learn it. But what I ultimately found was I need to do it in a way that I'm comfortable with, and I need to also be honest with myself about the types of people that I work with, who I think I am the most best paired up with. There are some people that work with nonverbal people and people that have crazy behaviors, and they rush to that. Like I am more of like, put me in like an academic situation with a student that's going to really be having a difficult time, and I come alive in that situation. Is that something that you see often? And like, what is your perspective on all that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple different things. One, like, I'm not gonna go like way up here with it. The idea is like it totally makes sense that people should be working in areas to which they're comfortable with. And what is behind that comfort is lots of different things. I mean, there's elements of the types of activities that the students are supporting that you kind of like yourself. You've had some success, and so you're reinforced. You feel confident in that area. I work with a range of folks. Like a lot of my research has been around teaching writing to kids with complex needs, so kids with intellectual disabilities, autism, kids that have minimal vocal behavior. But I also spend most of the time when people call me to come out, it's about problem behavior, and we're talking pretty severe problem behavior. And so, what's really interesting for me is a lot of teachers. I'm in a teacher training and a BCBA training program at a university. A lot of teachers just aren't prepared for really hard behaviors, and so it's almost traumatic for them. And I don't think it's because they're bad or not.
Do
You
you
know,
mean like gen ed teachers, or do you mean teachers that are in a
both.
special
But
day?
even
Okay.
special ed teachers. I mean, because special ed teachers, they get their behavior management course usually like the year before they graduate. So they've forgotten all of it. They come out there and then they get like an 18-year-old that's, you know, smearing poop or coming at self-injury or coming
Yeah.
at them, right? And suddenly they're like, wait a minute, I'm not good at what I was supposed to do. And I think it's really traumatic and sad. I think that we don't do a good job of listening to teachers, and really being honest about the difficulties of the job, right? And setting them up. So I think you can train for sure new repertoires in people. You know, like Evan, we could sit down and we could train you how to be the best at working with kids that are engaged in the most severe behaviors. But you're not going to do it if that's not what you enjoy the most. And I think that sometimes we have these value judgments in education, like, well, what's wrong with Evan? He doesn't work with those kids. No, you just kind of find your niche, and that's what you're into, right?
Well, I remember saying, like, because eventually it came to a point where I had to talk to someone about this just because of like what I was feeling. And I said, look, I go, I'm not looking for easier. I go, that's not what this is about. I go, I just want that engagement. And so like, give me more, give me more, give me more. But it was more, and you bring up a really good point. Like a lot of teachers are not like they get that one course, but then it's like suddenly they're thrown in and they're dealing with behaviors and challenging behaviors of the likes that they've never seen, and
but with a bunch of other kids at the same time. Yep. Like in a textbook, you could visualize yourself saying, "Oh, I can implement this strategy," but then when you're doing it and answering parents' questions, teaching 10, 20 other kids, like it's almost an impossible job to do. And so that's a lot of the things I talk about. I do a lot of speaking, and it's really about letting teachers off the hook a little bit, not about accountability or quality, but letting them know that, yeah, your job is almost impossible and it's okay to be stressed about it. So let's just start, kind of growing a little bit at a time. But for you, Evan, I would say that, and I think you already know this, like the work that you're doing is equally as impactful. Like I get sad because nobody ever calls me out because a kid is not learning fast enough. And that's really where that's what I've studied. That's what I'm pretty good at. But they call me out because the challenging behavior that's happening. And so there are millions of kids. I mean, I see it every day. I go into schools all the time. Kids that are just not getting great instruction or are struggling, not responding to what, the teachers give, and they need extra support. And they're just not getting it. And because they're not getting it, their outcomes are going to be less optimal than, there are kids that we can really give some great shots that, like, we can really support that are not getting that. And again, I think that they're both they're both important. Certainly, it's really, when somebody's engaged in self-injury or really dangerous behavior, there's a level of like immediacy, but just in terms of long-term impact, we need people that love both those types of work.
Well, that is the thing, and I love my district. I love where I work. Like there's like stuff happening, and people bring up like the union and this and that, and all the different jobs. Like, oh, this isn't in my job description. And my only complaint to any of that would be, I think, what they should do with whether you are a paraeducator, whether you are a behavior interventionist, no matter what type of aid you are, is just ask everyone, hey, where do like what environment do you want to be in? And then kind of go from there. And I initially started off, I was going to become a teacher, and then once I got into being a behavior interventionist, I was like, I love this. I literally get to work directly with the students without having to deal with a lot of the stuff I'm sure that you've probably dealt with in your life with, whereas I love the parents, but that can kind of wear on you, I would think, if you had 30 parents, you have 15 kids, that's 30 parents, plus you have the administration, plus you have lawyers, plus you have all the, like, I wouldn't do well with all that. But I love the immediate, like, we're working together, and yeah, I just, when I saw that you were doing this, when Duncan did the post and I saw what your book was about, I was like, that makes all the sense in the world that he would be involved in this field. So, it's great to reconnect. How many years later?
Back
27
at
years?
it. I mean, it has been. I mean, I turned 50 this year, and it's just unbelievable. Like, I don't know how that happened.
Okay, so now I'm gonna ask you. Now I'm gonna go into the interview questions. But just so you know, but before our last talk, Farside was playing, and they were playing with that one band. Oh gosh, who was that one band? Oh my gosh, they were big '90s band, Louisville, I think. That's
Is it
where.
Falling Forward?
No, keep going. They're falling forward. It was. Oh god, it was one of those bands. They were good. They were.
Rodan? No. Was it Rodan?
No. It was.
Train? You're saying from Louisville.
It was like, oh gosh, I forget. Split Lip.
Split Lip from Indiana, yeah.
It may
That
have been,
makes
yeah.
sense.
It was one of those. It was one of those. I saw you on the stage and I said, hey, I forget what band it was. I said, hey, I hear you're doing a new band. And you yelled back at me, I need a bath. And then we just kind of went and then we just laughed. And then we talked after this. But, okay, how does Rob Pennington, young Rob Pennington, or I should say younger Rob Pennington, how does he get into hardcore? Punk, all of it.
Neighbor.
Neighbor.
So
Okay.
Older dude, Myron Hardesty. It was a combination of things. So like it was some background work by my older neighbor Myron, who was a couple years older, had a mohawk, was the paper boy. You know, I was like 7th grade listening to Rat and first Motley Crue record and whatever, and he's like, no, you need to listen to this. And then simultaneously started, I was bully bait at my school, and so then I found like this friend Christy Canfield and a few other folks that were kind of into new wave. And then around 8th grade or so, I just started listening. It might be the cassette Flip Your Wig, I think. Husker dude. But anyway, I started getting into people just started sharing music with me, and then it was on. It was just kind of like I found a community, I found a place I was safe. There was some, there was some parental stress at home. I just needed a community, and this was perfect. And so yeah, that's kind of how it happened. And then I did it all. I was a skateboarder. I was sneaking off, going to shows. I would go to school and sneak my combat boots in my backpack so my dad wouldn't know.
Why were your parents like vehemently against punk, or were they just? Or
they were just. I mean, they're awesome, but they were from a very country background, a little more conservative. My mom was ultimately the best always in terms of kind of advocating for me and stuff, but it was just really different for them. I was laughing. I was telling somebody the other day. I remember I was like 16. My dad's out mowing the lawn. And remember, they're like Baptists. Ray Capo and the Hare Krishnas drive down my street and pick me up. Like, because there's some show in Louisville, and I jump in a van with a bunch of Hare Krishnas. My parents were just like, "Why?" So based on their learning history and what their expectations of life should be, seeing their son this way, they were just like, "Are you in a cult? What is happening?" So yeah, I mean, I understand why they were so, weirded out by it all. But yeah, so that it was just a perfect community. So I did all that. I skateboard. I wasn't that great at skateboarding. I think I stopped when we were doing bonelesses still on the street before we got on the kick flips and stuff. And then I got into a band, and I was like, "Oh, this is awesome."
And so what band was this? What band?
The first band ever was called Society Stricken. It's terrible. And then I think we played one show, and then I got into a band called Fist that played, like 8 shows or so, and then we were switched to Food Fight, and we got to play with Soul Side, which was awesome. And then quickly we moved to Duncan. I hooked up with Duncan, and then we started doing Death Watch, which they put out a 7-inch, right? And then we flipped into Endpoint, and then
how does that happen with Duncan? Just because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going off of my memories from like the 90s. You guys always seem to like. It seemed like best friends, right? Like, am I wrong? And so then, how'd you guys meet? What was like? Did you hit it off right away? What's the thing there?
No, Duncan had an older sister and was already like in the scene, so he was way cooler than I was. He was in a band called Crisis, you know, and I remember thinking like he didn't like me or something, or he kicked me at a show because he had like a devil's lock, was in boots, and was like 15, like and so anyway, I can't remember how we started hanging out. Duncan has a better memory for this, but we started hanging out, and then the band I was in, Fist, was with Jason Graff, who was friends with Duncan, and so they were doing a new band, and they were like, well, we should invite this Rob to come sing for us. And so I tried out, and they said it was hilarious. Duncan still talks to say, like, you know, I started rolling around the floor, like I was so like, you know, energetic and hyper. And so that's kind of how it all came about. And, you know, we've really been, you know, I'm an only child, so I never had any brothers. And then, you know, I don't know, we just became very close, spent a lot of time together. We still talk every other day at least. He's up in South Dakota now. And so, you know, he's probably the closest thing I had to a brother. So that's just kind of how it's played out.
But I'm saying, like, the way you just talked about him, like, just kind of how you got, like, very reverential. That I don't know what it was, but I kind of saw that. Even though, like, it's not like I spent, like, I would talk to you and I would talk to him. I never didn't really hang out with the both of you at the exact same time when you guys were out in California. But I could just see that. And so you guys start Death Watch. And I did a little bit of research. Tell me if this is correct. Did you guys do like a 17-song cassette, or is
that was Endpoint? That was a switch over. So that's called If the Spirits Are Willing.
Okay,
and that actually came out on vinyl later. But yeah, that was like kind of Death Watch, and then we were like, we got to change the name. Duncan was into like a lot into horror and creepy things, and Death Watch is like the name of a beetle. It goes up and like bangs its head and lets you, I don't know, I think the myth was that, you know, you're gonna die or something if you hear this beetle's head. And so we started getting into like, you know, hardcore, and so we're like, we need a name that sounds, and so he actually proposed Endpoint because he was taking geometry in school. And then I came up with the kind of definition behind it, which is on the back of those shirts. I was like, oh, this is what it means. And like, yeah. And so so that demo, or that 17-song demo, kind of really was a amalgam of both those bands. We were growing. We were learning how to play our instruments. We were doing different things. You'll listen at first, If the Spirits Are Willing, and it's hilarious. Like, there'll be like a junka song, and there's one that's kind of like a weird, like, you know, like what little teenagers could do, you know, of like a Metallica sounding song.